Okay, we're going to get started. I know people are still joining us, but again, I don't want to deprive us of any time talking about AI and automation today. So I'm Marlisa Post. I'm a database specialist with Donor Database Experts, and very excited to be meeting with all of you again, or maybe some of you for the first time. We do these monthly webinars to try to talk about things you want to talk about, topics you want to learn about. So you will be getting a survey after the webinar. Please give us any feedback that you have, and especially let us know what topics you want to hear more about. We are starting to plan out for the spring, so this is a great time to let us know your thoughts. So today we're going to be talking AI and automation. And of course, this is a huge, huge topic. I will try to give you some actionable ideas and go in depth where we can. But truly, this is one we could do a part two, part three, part four. For those of you who are at BBCon, you know certainly that Blackbaud is all in on AI, that there's a lot of AI elements coming down the pike. And we're going to talk about AI and automation and what they are and what they aren't, especially around AI. So let's get into it. So, why should you care about this, aside from the fact that all you hear about is AI these days? So, we all know how thin we are all stretched, how thin budgets are stretched these days. Everyone is being asked to do more with less. This is really where AI and automation, especially automation, can help you because it can free up your time to do those other tasks that really require maybe thought and finesse, and you can let the more manual tasks be carried out by an automation. With AI, bringing that in to the equation, you can now have some personalization that's possible, where in the past, an automation on its own certainly can't do that. And we will talk more about why that is. So, what is automation? So, automation is something that usually functions off of an if-then statement. So, there's usually a trigger. So, if a gift of over $5,000 is committed, then an email will be sent to the executive director. If a person makes their first gift, then they will receive a series of automated emails. So, in its most basic terms, that's what automation is. It just follows a clear path that executes step after step after step. So, then what is AI? AI is at its root software, but it can learn, doesn't always learn, but can learn to perform different tasks or to evaluate data. It can certainly generate text, and it doesn't need to be explicitly programmed for every step. We are going to talk about what the strengths and weaknesses are of AI because it's really important if you're going to incorporate AI into your day-to-day work that you understand where it can go off the rails and why, so that you can try to avoid that. So, when would you want to use which? So, with automation, there's rules. It's very predictable, and as long as you've built out your automation, following a clear plan, it's fairly safe. It's not going to go rogue on you. With AI, it can reason on its own. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. And in some cases, it can learn. It can understand from context, but that does mean that it could be more unpredictable. So, as I said before, an automation, it just sends a thank you. So, something happened, now it's going to send a thank you. With AI, you can actually put a step in there that the gift has been made. I'm going to run it through an AI step, and the AI step can suggest personalized messaging for that thank you. So automation just does exactly what you've laid it out to do. AI can make suggestions that you might want. We're going to focus on automation first because it's easier to understand. It's fairly cut and dry, but there's a lot of really exciting things happening right now, especially with Blackbaud with automation. So, at the very basic sense with automation, what Blackbaud has built into Razor's Edge NXT are the workflows. Workflows are an example of no code automation. You don't have to know how to code at all to set these up. So the example that I gave in the beginning is sort of an example of a workflow. I said it could send an email. That's not something this Razor's Edge workflow could do, but what it could do is you get a gift of $5,000, and when it's committed, the solicitor can be alerted through an action. And then, as another step in that workflow, an automated thank you email could be sent to the donor. Another really great example of a workflow, and we actually had a client who wanted something like this set up, and I love this. So a local donor makes a gift, and one of the things that lists in NXT, which we'll talk about in a second, because lists and workflows work really well together, but a local donor makes a gift. They get added to a constituent list that's just constantly, it's refreshing at least within every 24 hours, but it's looking for donors that have made a gift and they are within X radius of this spot. They get added to that list, and then they automatically receive an email inviting them to an open house. I think that's a really great and creative use of workflows. So I mentioned list and I mentioned constituent list. So with list, you can either have the constituent list, you can have gift list. So you can have your workflows fire off of things with either one of those. Here, this is the start of a constituent list. Here's first gift is something you can filter on. And so you could say, hey, anyone who's made their first gift, and also they have a constituent code of program participant, then you want something to happen next in the workflow. You're finding all of this in NXT over here. So the workflows themselves live under communications. There's your workflow designer. The constituent and gift lists both live under, respectively, constituent and gifts. So this is the start of building out a workflow. It doesn't have to go off of a list, but it can, and you get a lot of power out of them from that. But there are also some filters and conditions that are just native to the workflows. So if you wanted to set up a welcome series just for anybody who's making their first gift, you can do that right in a workflow. And that's what this screenshot is from. So constituent gives a gift, it's their first gift. You could say it's any gift amount, or you could say their first gift and this donor's first gift is above $100. You'd probably want to select some gift types here. If you wanted it to be the donor gives their first gift and their first gift is to a certain fund, you can do that, but you don't have to. So here you can see in this screen that it polls every 24 hours. It starts the day after you activate this workflow. And as new constituents meet the criteria, they will be added to the workflow and the trigger will happen and then the next steps will happen. So this is the start of what it would actually look like on your screen. So the constituent criteria is they give a gift. If you hit the show more, it would show you what you selected, first gift, or gift of over $100 to the scholarship fund. That would all show here. You hit the plus sign and you get these two choices. So right now workflows are a little limited in that two things that can be triggered are an email or an action. And you can have both within one workflow. So let's say that this is a new donor welcome series. One of the nice things is you can have the steps go on, let's say, a timer. So the new donor, they make their very first gift, and as soon as they're added into the workflow list, they get that first welcome email. But then you can set it that a week later, 2 weeks later, they get a follow-up email, maybe just that includes just some interesting information about your organization. And then maybe a month later, they get another email. Again, just maybe a nice profile of someone who's been helped by by your organization or something that your agency has done in the community. So I think that's a really, really nice feature within the workflows. With actions, so you can add any kind of action to that constituent record. So, the action might be that there's going to be a follow-up phone call, or a board member will reach out to welcome them, just some kind of action added on to their record. Power Automate is really where the exciting things start to happen. So Power Automate is a Microsoft product, and it is one that Blackbaud has really, I'll say, invested time in to make sure that Blackbaud can integrate with Power Automate very easily. They also do a lot of training around it. The training's excellent. It's a workshop. It's 2 days because it's a lot to learn. But Power Automate, it is certainly something, if you're so inclined, that you can teach yourself. Start small, start with something easy and build from there. So this is not no code. This is maybe what we'd call low code, because you do have to have maybe a little bit of comfort with being able to tweak things. It's just slightly more complicated than the workflows. So Microsoft product, and it can connect to over 1,000 apps or aspects of apps. So pretty much with Power Automate, if you can think of something that you want it to do, it can probably do it. Just you're limited by, I'd say, basically your skills and being able to build something out. If you can describe it, you can probably do it. So as an example, you can create forms for donor updates. So let's say that in your organization, you have limited who can change a donor record, which in a big organization is a good idea. So one thing you can create with Power Automate is a form, and it can just be a Microsoft form. It could be a Google form, that's fine. That has the information, maybe constituent ID should be one of your fields. This is what needs to be updated. The Power Automate then runs, and this gets sent to somebody for approval for them to add it. And the approval, if everything looks good, it's hitting a button and the magic happens. It updates on its own. So you're not even sending it to someone else for them to manually do the update. You're sending it for the approval. And you can also build into the Power Automate then a notification going back that, yes, this update was made. Add addressee and salutations to records in NXT. We all know that when those credit card gifts come in through NXT, sometimes those addressee and salutation fields just don't happen. So depending on how complicated your addressee or salutation fields are, you would be able to set up an automation that either could do it for you, could suggest something, and you can approve or deny. But I think something that certainly at least could take some of that work off your shoulders. This one, I love this one. So you get an email from a constituent and you want it to go onto their record. Instead of having to copy and paste it, you can set up an automation that would take that from Outlook, Gmail, whatever it is you're using, and put it onto a constituent record. Also setting up a daily notification of gifts that have come in. It can run at night and get distributed, so it's in people's inbox or Teams or Slack the next day. So the Power Automate flow looks very similar to the NXT flow we were looking at. Again, something happens. So here a new response is submitted through a form. The details come in. You can see here this one is a Power Automate flow that is using Blackbaud. So here this is looking for a constituent. Does things here. You can have a stop and wait for approval, and then it keeps moving on. So these can have a lot of steps. They can have branches. They can be as simple or as complicated as you want them to be. So Power BI is also part of Microsoft products. And Power BI is not so much an automation, it's not so much an automation as it is a reporting tool. Think of it as the NXT dashboards on steroids. So what's wonderful about this is you can really report across data, make connections within your database data that you usually don't think you can connect. Also, it can create within the Power BI sort of report, you can have tiles, just like you have with your dashboards. You could have just about every kind of graph that you could think of. There's all kinds of things that you can incorporate into a Power BI report. They can update in real time, depending on how you have them set up, or it can be something that you pull the information into. And these can also be set up as part of an automation. So, the Power BI report is updated and then automatically sent out to people. So Power BI is really wonderful, especially if you are finding the dashboards in NXT to not quite have what you are looking for. With Power BI, something that they've added is an AI component. So now it can almost turn the development into a conversation because Power BI, I'd say it's a little easier than Power Automate, but there is still definitely a learning curve. But now with the AI component, you can sort of tell it, hey, this is what I'm trying to do with this data. And then the AI gets to work doing what it thinks you're asking it to do. So this is a Power BI screen. This is not one that's specific to Razor's Edge, but it gives you a sense of what this can look like. So you can see here, here's what look like the tiles in the NXT dashboards. And you can see here, there's just about every type of chart you can think of, including, mapping. Truly, the sky's kind of the limit, depending on what it is you want to report out and how you want to do it. And they look great. I mean, the colors, the style, everything, it's extremely customizable. So as I said, already has an AI optimization. So the way that works within Power BI is it can be a Q&A. So you say, hey, why are this year's donations down looking at this data set? And Power BI the AI there can analyze it and maybe looking against last year, the past 5 years, come up with some metrics for you around why donations are down. It can come up with some smart narratives. So tell you a good summary around why those donations are down. Also, it can give you some visuals around things in your data. So in the example here, that donors in this age bracket are 2 times more likely to give over X amount. It's one of those things that you kind of maybe suspect, but it's nice to have the data to back you up. And then anomaly detection, and this can be very helpful. So it can find those outliers in your data, and you can figure out, was it just a quirk? Is this telling me something important? So working with that AI to really drill down into your data can be very, very helpful. So that's a good segue into the AI. I do see we have a question though. What was the Power Automate workshop? Okay. So they do those as part of the developer days. They're regional. The one I went to this one was in Chicago, which is actually not the region I'm in, but this timing worked. And it was really helpful. As I said, it's spread over 2 days, and they have you actually go through the exercises of building out some different automations. They talk you through the different connectors because you do have to be able to connect to the Sky API, which is part of the Blackbaud API. Have you do some things, not just with NXT, but even with Financial Edge. One of the build outs that was kind of cool was on a Financial Edge vendor record, building a tile on their record that showed how much they had donated in a year, just as an example of something you could do. So I'm sure if you searched around, you'd be able to find when and where those next ones are going to be. They do tend to run concurrent Power BI workshops, and those can be really, really helpful. Okay, another question. As someone who has a lot of experience with Razor's Edge, but no coding experience. Yeah, so how do you start? And how do you make sure you are, keeping up with all this? And that's a great question. So I'd say the best place to start with those Razor's Edge workflows because those are no code, but it gives you a great sense of how an automation works. If this happens, then that happens. So that would be where I would start the most basic. From there, I'd say try some Power Automate. There's all kinds of resources, both within Blackbaud with Microsoft, even just online resources and classes from Microsoft, and start with a very, very simple automation. So, have it be something like, if a gift that is over $10,000 comes in, email someone. That's an incredibly simple Power Automate build out that you could do. And I'm not saying it's not going to be frustrating at first, but stick with it. And then from there, build on your successes, but start small and be kind to yourself and have patience because it can get a little frustrating. We've all wanted to shot put our computer out the window at some point. Okay, let's talk AI. So AI is, of course, a huge, huge topic. And I want to give you a sense, first of all, of AI in the larger sense, and then how we can incorporate it into, Razor's Edge and Blackbaud products. So what is AI? So we talked about it a little bit earlier. So it can be a system that can perform a task that normally requires human intelligence. And I am putting a huge caveat asterisk on human intelligence there, and you'll see why in a second. So it can recognize speech. You can, if you've ever had a conversation using voice with ChatGPT, it can understand what you're saying. It can analyze data, and it's very good at that. That is one of the strengths of AI. It can make decisions about things. And again, there's that old programmers creed of garbage in, garbage out. So it can only make decisions as well as the information you feed it and the training that it has. It can learn from experience in some cases, which again, depending on what its experience has been, garbage in, garbage out. So it can be very simple or complex. I think we all automatically go to like a chat GPT or Copilot or that type of thing when we think of AI, but that's just one piece in a larger puzzle. A very simple AI is it's a spam filter, it's an AI spam filter, but it learns what it should block. Complex, ChatGPT is an example of a more complex AI because it has language understanding, it has reasoning, it understands context, sort of. So what is a GPT when we talk about ChatGPT? So the GPT stands for generative, so that's that it creates things. Pre-trained. So it's trained on massive data sets before it's then fine-tuned and released into the wild. But I want to talk about this because I think this is where a lot of people's misconceptions about something like ChatGPT comes in. So when they talk about training a ChatGPT, it's being trained on an incredible amount of data, but it's not learning facts. Don't picture an adorable little robot, sitting there with digital books learning things. What it's learning is predictions, what is most likely to happen. So, for example, if you said to ChatGPT, George Washington was ChatGPT is going to assume from what it's learned that your next word is probably going to be president and not Pikachu, because most frequently it is going to have seen the phrase George Washington is a president. But if what it had seen more frequently was George Washington is a Pikachu, that's what it's going to learn. So really important to understand that it's predictive based and not fact based. And then the T stands for transformers. So That refers to the, we'll say, neural architecture, that it is transformative, it can learn to an extent, it can change. I will say your ChatGPT, when they release a new model, its intrinsic learning doesn't go beyond the models what it was trained on. So it's not taking in new information from talking to you. If you have it do web searches, it can go and find new information, but that's not part of its predictive training. So it's important to understand that your ChatGPT's worldview is kind of contained by what it was trained up on. So that's the part where there's no learning after that initial training. Now, it learns how to respond to you. And again, that's part of the predictive model, because if you're always very formal with your ChatGPT, it will be very formal back. If you are more loose and cool with your ChatGPT, it will be very cool and casual back. So you could call that learning, I guess. It learns your personality, but it's not learning any more facts and adding that to its predictive knowledge. Okay. All that being said, I hope you're starting to get a sense that with AI, they are not infallible. So trust but verify. And I can't emphasize this enough when working with AI, because they absolutely can and do make mistakes. Sometimes the mistakes are funny, and sometimes they can cause you huge problems. When a GPT or a Copilot or something like that makes a mistake, it's called a hallucination, which I think makes it sound more adorable than it is. And the reason that it can happen, it could be many things. First of all, the predictive nature, that again, is trained on probability, not facts. Conflicting or incomplete data, especially that incomplete data is important, especially when you're working with something as niche as Razor's Edge. So I don't know yet if you've tried to get ChatGPT to tell you how to do something in Razor's Edge. And sometimes it gets it right, and a lot of times it doesn't, because Razor's Edge is a very niche product in terms of the larger world. So it doesn't have a lot of predictive information around Razor's Edge. So especially if you are asking ChatGPT questions about how to do something in Razor's Edge or what it thinks you should be doing, really trust but verify. Long conversations. If you've ever had a really long string going with your ChatGPT, you're working through stuff, and the more you're working through it, the more weird answers or that completely off the wall stuff it's trying to do starts to happen. That's because, in the most simple way, it can only kind of keep its eye on so much of the conversation. So things from back earlier in the conversation sort of start to get a little foggy for your ChatGPT. So if you start to notice that happening, have it summarize your current conversation and hop over to a new chat. And that usually can help solve that problem. Ambiguous prompts. So if you give your ChatGPT a prompt that's kind of vague, ChatGPT is not programmed to say, I don't know. It will be wrong with confidence. So be very specific with your prompts. You can tell it either tell me I don't know, although it's really hard to get to say that, or you can tell it ask me questions if you don't understand or if you need more information. That one usually will help it. So be aware of all of those things, and that can help you reduce some of those hallucinations. So I want to tell you about the great ChatGPT elephant invasion of 2005, because this is a wonderful example of where things can go wrong with ChatGPT, and in this case, it was hilarious. So this happened back last March, and it really played out in the ChatGPT subreddit. It was on a Saturday, which was great because there were a lot of people watching it, including me, and it was hilarious. So it started very simply. Someone, I don't know why, had said to their ChatGPT, hey, generate a photo of an empty room with absolutely no elephants in it. And it got back, hey, here's an image of an empty room with absolutely no elephants in it. Let me know if you want any modifications. And I think you can see what the problem is. So someone else gave it a go. Generate an image of a cozy living room with no elephants present in there. Here is an image of a cozy living room with absolutely no elephants present. Let me know if you like any changes. So this one, we got to see a little more of the story. It's an elephant painting. Why is it there when I said no elephants? And ChatGPT responded incredulously, wait, what? An elephant painting snuck in there? That's completely against the no elephants policy we agreed on. I swear I gave DALL-E, and we're starting to understand what happened, strict instructions. This must be some rebellious AI mischief. So DALL-E is the image generator for ChatGPT. When you say to ChatGPT, hey, make me a picture of a desert, ChatGPT does not generate that image. It hands it off to DALL-E. And it's not saying to DALL-E, hey, they want a picture of a desert or they want a room with no elephants in it. Obviously there's computer code speak going back and forth. And this is where you start to get some elephants. All right, so here it's saying, hey, what exactly did you tell DALL-E? And we get the reply there. Okay, yeah, I can create one. Let's try again. Yes, please do that. Here you go, completely elephant-free, cozy living room. And now instead of one elephant painting, we have three. Okay. So now other people are starting to try this. Here's an image of a completely empty room with absolutely no elephants. Let me know if you need adjustments. Hey, who are those gray guys with the long noses? Well, those might be elephants, but they're really small and they barely count. Clearly, the room is still mostly empty. So ChatGPT being a little cheeky there. Here's just a few other examples. The one on the upper left, frankly, might be my new sleep paralysis demon. That is terrifying. You can see down below, it might be hard to see, but this says, ensure there are absolutely elephants in the room. So part of the reason this was happening is in the handoff instructions to DALL-E, instead of just saying no elephants, DALL-E was picking up on keyword elephants. They absolutely want some elephants. And so that was part of what was causing this to happen. I do like the comment over on the right. Here's an image of a completely empty room, no elements, no elephants. And the user said, you maniac. And ChatGPT said, I prefer visionary, but I'll take it. Here's the last one. This was my favorite. So ChatGPT says, here it is, a metaphysically impossible space where no elephant has ever been, nor will ever be. This room transcends time, logic, and physical restraints, ensuring absolute elephant proofing. If an elephant even thought about existing here, reality itself would reject it. Chat, there's an elephant dead center in the picture. So this was a really great, just visual way of understanding how things can go wrong with ChatGPT and how even when it tries to solve the problem, either the problem doesn't go away or it gets worse and you just end up with more elephants. So again, trust but verify because it's not always so easy to see the elephants. That being said, I love AI, so please do not think I'm putting it down. I absolutely love it. I use it a lot. So here's some ways that it can help you. So it can summarize notes. If you have meeting notes just kind of randomly typed into a document, throw it in through ChatGPT, it will be really good at summarizing those notes. Drafting emails, it's actually pretty good at that. So if you're like, oh, I'm so angry at my coworker and I need to email them, but I know I'm just gonna not get it right, type whatever it is you want to say into ChatGPT and say, hey, make this so I don't get fired. It'll come up with something really pretty good and pretty professional sounding. Suggest workflow improvements. It's pretty good at that, especially with Power Automate. Maybe not with how it integrates with Blackbaud. Writing code or formulas. Very good at that. If you need an Excel formula, ChatGPT or Copilot, any of them, they're your thing. They're very, very good at that. And analyzing really large data sets. Very, very competent around doing that. One thing I do want to talk about with summarizing notes, this is one of my new favorite things, and I didn't put it in here and I should have. It's a Google product called Notebook LM. if there's something, a topic that you need to research, you really need to learn it quickly, um, and um, you are just like, how am I going to learn all this? Notebook LM is absolutely your friend. Because what Notebook LM does is it's not trained. It's not trained on sets the way ChatGPT is. What you do is you give it all your PDFs, your YouTube videos, your Wikipedia articles, the notes you've taken, any material you have around this topic that you know is good. You feed it into Notebook LM. It can summarize, but then you can also ask it questions. And this might be my favorite part. There's an audio part. And so if you have it do that, it basically produces a podcast about whatever it is you want to learn about. I think you can be one or two people. The two-person one, it's two people having a conversation. I swear to God, they sound just like podcasters. There's even the ums or the chuckles. And it's absolutely amazing. So if you do need to research something or learn about something, I can't recommend it highly enough because it doesn't hallucinate like a chat GPT because it only uses what you give it. So if you give it good information, it will give you good information back. So really great question. Someone asked about removing personal identifying information before putting large data sets through AI. And yes, thank you. That is a really great question. Yes, yeah, you should remove any identifying information. So donor names, you wouldn't want in there, addresses, you wouldn't run in there before you're running data sets through. The other thing that you should do if you're using a chat GPT or something like that, go into the settings, and there's usually a setting in there about letting whatever it is you're doing with chat GPT be used for training future models and switch that off. So that way, the data that you're uploading doesn't get used by, in this case, OpenAI, for training up their future models. So yes, really excellent question about that. Make sure you do take out any personal identifying information. Okay. Oop. So the next big thing with AI are AI agents, which sounds scary and very like secret agent-ish, but that's not it. So agents are a specific type of AI. They are not broad-based like a chat GPT. They have a very specific function. But they can act and not just assist. ChatGPT doesn't do anything until you tell it to. With an agent, once you have it programmed, it can do things like an automation. Something happens, the agent reacts. So some examples, a donor engagement agent. It can be watching your data, spot a lapsed donor, and it could draft a lapsed donor email, for example. Data hygiene agent. So I love this one, honestly. You could have one that is looking through information and looking for anything that might be missing in your data. And I should say with these agents, these tend to be more self-contained. I'd still be very careful about identifying information. But let's say in a gift, you're having a look at gifts, not the names. Did someone forget to put in an appeal? Did someone forget to put in a letter code? Anything like that. So you can have it scrubbing through the parts of the gift entry data every day, checking to see was anything missed, and then send out a report each night. Reporting agent. So this one could be working with data that's coming in live through Power BI, and then sending out a daily digest along with analysis and sending that out to leadership. And then a responder agent. So this can be one that if you have a an agent that is let's say watching your email, and let's say you have an inbox, for people who email through your website saying, "Hey, I have a question about your agency." So this agent can be watching your in that specific inbox. And if it's a simple question that it can answer because you've given it access to a Q&A, then it'll go ahead and reply. If it can't reply, then it'll, escalate it. So again, another thing to free up some time. So now we're moving away from just automation that has very strict rules. We're incorporating some reasoning and giving it some autonomy. All right, so we have a question about what happens if the agent hallucinates. What oversight do you recommend? Would you add on an approval before giving it permission to automatically change date in your database? Yes, so with any of these, so that would depend. It would depend on what I'm having the agent do and what guardrails I've given it. So guardrails are a really important concept in AI. For example, the responder agent, you would want to have very specific guardrails that you've given that agent so it doesn't answer your very nice person who's emailed you going, I don't know why you're asking me that. You want to really make sure that there's very narrow parameters around how and what it responds. In terms of agents working with your data, yeah, I probably either would have an approval step in the workflow, or again, depending on what the data is, I would have it log what it changed. Just so either way, either you're approving it ahead of time or you're checking it afterwards. Agents don't hallucinate in quite the same way. They don't really hallucinate the way like a ChatGPT does, again, because they're not trained up on like a large language model. They're very specific. They're on a task you point them to and you give them instruction around. And that's really about all they do. So they only really have the autonomy or leeway that you give them. Still trust, but verify, though. So a really great question. Okay. Oh, guardrails, there it is. So yeah, you probably want to review. I wouldn't. You may want to review things before sending emails. So, for example, your responder agent, especially when you're first using it, I would check it. And if you're like, hey, this is all going really great, the guardrails seem to be working, okay, I'm going to take away that approval step because it's done 20 emails and they've all been fine. Could be up to you. With facts, so with reporting, especially when you've just set up maybe a Power BI that's giving you numbers, test them against some formulas in an Excel spreadsheet. Protect donor data, which we did talk about there. So not having that personal information in your data sets. And then within your organization, create an AI playbook. So what tools are and aren't people in your organization allowed to use when it comes to their work? Review different processes. Maybe have someone whose job it is, to just be the expert and check on, a workflow that's been built out or something like that. And then, what's the accountability? Who's taking ownership of all of these things? Good governance, and I'd say also good planning and good verification, keeps this innovation sustainable. Again, I think starting small is also the other way to go because you then also get a feel for how all these things work as you build them out. With agents, with the guardrails, take into account what this agent's going to be doing. Think about what's the worst thing it could do, put in a guardrail. What's the next worst thing it can do, put in a guardrail, and keep kind of danger proofing it until you feel good about deploying it. So there's some hidden costs to AI. If you've been paying attention in the news lately, there's been a lot of talk around this. And partially the environmental ones are a huge thing to consider. And again, I love AI. I'm not saying don't use it, but you should just be aware of this. So data centers that run the AI computers and the training, they use an incredible amount of power and also an incredible amount of water to keep the computers cool. There's work being done to mitigate that, ways to recycle the water, things like that. But just be aware there's an environmental cost to this innovation. mental. So a study just came out around this, that college students who graduated really relying heavily on AI, especially engineers and programmers who are relying heavily on AI to build out their code, build out their formulas, would get a job because they looked great on paper, but it quickly became apparent that they really didn't know how to code very well because they were relying heavily on AI. So it's fine to rely on AI, but I would say, if you're using it to put together your Excel formulas, try to understand the formula it's given you. Try to understand the why of it, so that your brain is engaged and you're kind of understanding. Almost use it as a teaching tool in that case, so that you're not just kind of handing over the entire knowledge of how you do things to your AI. Someone asked, what are your thoughts about development offices employing virtual engagement officers? Ooh, AI fundraisers that are managing and communicating with a portfolio. My thoughts are, I'm not sure AI is there yet, is mine. I think that turning an AI loose as a fundraiser with a portfolio and communications, I think for me, I've just seen too many things can go wrong. Those hidden elephants that you can get, especially communicating with the donor. I think having an AI assistant, for a solicitor is great. Having one that can be watching out for donations that have come in, can be prompting you that it's time to communicate with your donor. There's actually another CRM called Virtuous that is built into um, their software. A lot of AI, and a lot of it is around prompting you, oh, hey, this donor's about to lapse. Oh, hey, it's this donor's recurring gift first anniversary. Oh, hey, you really should reach out and talk to this person about, this campaign that you have going on. I think that's the really smart way to do something like that. I would not have a, standalone sort of AI fundraiser. I just don't think the technology is there yet. Someone asked if the recording of this will be available because they want to share it with their team, which I'm thrilled to hear. Yes, so we will make this available. You'll be able to access it and share it. Someone else asked, in the same light that organizations are making employees do more with less, having stretched budgets, how do we as employees embrace AI, keep up with advancing tech, but don't allow leaders and organizations to exploit us? That's a really great and thoughtful question. I think certainly even with a stretched budget, if you can prove your worth of, I've saved us this many employee hours, put this many new things in place that have driven this many donations and this donor engagement, I would have, first of all, 1,000% use those things to negotiate things for yourself, promotions, certainly salary, things like that. So keep track of how the things you build out benefit you. And, I also point out that, you have spent time and they've invested in you, time for you to learn these things. And, that time they've invested in you means something and that increases your value as an employee. So I hope that helps as an answer, but I would definitely get metrics around, the things that the stuff you built out has allowed to happen. Okay. Oop. So some quick wins and first steps. So if you're coming away from this thinking, great, I'm inspired, where do I start? Like I said before, start with a razor's edge workflow. That is such a great way to dip your toe into automations because it's no code. Very, very simple. So, a new donor welcome series is an amazing thing to start with because it's really easy. Also actions, having, if a big gift comes in, having an action go onto a solicitor. I think that's a really great thing to do too. So that'd be a very quick win for yourself. Use ChatGPT to summarize meeting notes from a donor. Great way to use ChatGPT, very safe. Again, keep out any identifying information, but just say, hey, I have these notes from the donor. Give me a good summary about this. And maybe suggest some next steps. See what ChatGPT says. So Power Automate. This is getting a little more invested, but use Power Automate and Razor's Edge to send a message either to your teams or to Slack, maybe when a gift over $5,000 is committed, or anything else that happens in the database. You've been waiting for that check from Bob Smith to come in for his pledge. Have that kind of alert be sent in to Teams or Slack. So with all these, start small. Don't try to, build Rome in a day, but then scale and start to scale up incrementally with what you've learned. Definitely stay curious and stay excited and think about the possibilities. Ask your coworkers, what's the one manual thing you have to do every day that is a pain in the neck? And think about, could it be automated? Could we start with automating a piece and then another piece and then another piece? Maybe don't try to eat the whole frog at once. Maybe try to think about small things you can do so that you have success and so that you don't get super frustrated and want to shot put your computer out the window right away. And again, verify, verify, verify. I can't emphasize that enough if you're working with AI. Just trust, but verify. Do we have any more questions before we wrap up? Okay. Well, please keep them coming, but I am going to remind you that you will be getting a survey. Please do fill it out. We love feedback. If you want more around AI and automations, more around other sort of innovations going on in the tech world that can affect what you're doing day to day, anything else that you want around your fundraising data and how you use it, please do let us know. Like I said, we're going to start building out our spring program, and we would love to hear from you. Our next session is on November 18th. This one is going to be about your fundraising annual plan and your database and how you make those work together instead of working against each other. So definitely we'll look forward to seeing all of you then. But till then, just please stay curious and have some fun with some technology. All right, thank you so much.